guy named Alf.
Sorry.
That's okay. The writer is a guy named Alfred Urey, who is Jewish. Bruce Beresford is not. Um, I don't think none of the actors playing Jews in this movie are Jewish. Um, so Alfred Urey grew up in Georgia around the time period. I mean, he would be something of a contemporary, I think, of a character like Booley. And so some of this is really written about his own, I believe, grandmother, and so it's pretty close to home for him. And he's written several plays. That he wrote three plays, let's call it a trilogy, about Jews in the South in this time period. And all three of them have been nominated for and won Tonys for best play, each one. This is the only one that's been made into a movie. So so and this was the first one. So it actually did win the Tony for best play. It, as you know, won an Oscar for best screenplay, and he also won the Pulitzer Prize for best play for Driving Miss Daisy. His next play was called Last Night of Ballyhoo. Not sure
Okay.
if you had the chance to see that one. It's actually about the night that the movie Gone with the Wind opened in Atlanta in 1939, and is also similar to this comic drama. And the third one was actually a musical, and he won the Tony for the best book of a musical that year. Um, for a musical, it was actually just revived on Broadway in the last year or so, called Parade, which is set a little bit earlier in Atlanta in the Jewish community. Um, near the turn of the 20th century, it's the story of Leo Frank, who was lynched, a Jewish man who was lynched in Georgia in 1912, I think. So that I saw the original production of this on Broadway in 1997, and
Hmm.
um,
I saw the one in 2023 with Ben Platt. It was amazing.
yeah, I've heard it was a really good revival and probably better than the original.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
I
was.
found the original was I found it was good, but it was sort of problematic. It was um, it's a very hard tone to hit to have a really serious musical, and that's a hard tone sometimes. So, um, but uh, but a very worthwhile endeavor for sure. And
Um,
I don't know.
Michaela Diamond was amazing. Everyone came for Ben, but stayed for her. I mean,
Yeah.
it, I can't say enough.
Right. So, but so that's Leo Urey. So he's really the only person of note involved with this movie who's actually Jewish. Um, but he gives a pretty authentic character, I think, to Jews of a certain time period in a certain place. So, I think it really is a good screenplay in that regard. So, in terms of the performers themselves, so the one I'd completely forgotten about was Patti LuPone, the great Broadway musical actress, plays Florine, married to Booley in this. So she's of Italian descent, but she does a great job in a small role, where it's just a few little details, make a big difference in terms of that. So, um, but the stars, of course, Jessica Tandy was born in 1909 in London. She plays Daisy. She really came on the scene. She was the original Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway in the 1950s. So, so her history with a Southern accent goes way back, and so when they made the movie version of A Streetcar Named Desire, she's the only one of the principal cast from Broadway who didn't get to play it on screen. So they switched to Vivian Lee to play Blanche Dubois, but Kim Hunter, yeah, and Marlon Brando and Carl Malden are all reprising roles that they had on Broadway. So, um, so a very distinguished stage actress over the years. Um, Better known for the stage than she was for movies, although she appeared in several films over the years. She was married to an actor named Hume Cronin
Mhm.
for decades. And they wrote some stuff together and appeared in plays together. And some of you may have seen one of their versions of the Gin Game that they performed in together over the years. Right? So Morgan Freeman here playing Hoke. Um, I don't know what to say about him. He's been in so many great movies and played so many great roles. We saw him in the one about Noah, Noah Almighty, last go round where he plays
God
God.
Almighty.
Yeah, right. So where he um, I'm he's of course well known in other movies like The Shawshank Redemption and
Mhm.
many others. So, um, uh, great voiceovers and things like that as well. So really terrific actor. He was kind of already on the map, of course, when this came out. I mean, I think um, he had um, already had an Oscar nomination, I think, for Best Supporting Actor at this point. And this same year, if I'm not mistaken, he was in uh, Glory.
Oh,
Uh, so, which by the um, so he lost to this. So Dan Aykroyd lost to Denzel Washington this year for Glory. Um, so that's uh, just a little side note about. I don't think.
Yeah, phenomenal memory. He's not taking notes. He's doing this all the time.
So, and you may have recognized it's a pretty small part, but Esther Roll playing the maid Idella.
Oh, okay.
She was the maid Florida was that Maud or All in the Family? Um, and then she spun off that role into a TV series called Good Times.
Mhm.
So, um,
was she in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? I'll
I
look
don't
it up.
know, maybe. Uh,
I love her.
yeah. So, but and she's very good in this movie. You know, she gets
Mhm.
a lot of sardonic replies to things here and there and does a great job. Is it in a very brief role as the rabbi at the temple in Atlanta, which by the way, that's what it's called. It does have a real name, but everybody who goes there just calls it the temple in Atlanta. Was the actual rabbi of the temple at the time that the movie was made, a guy named Alvin Sugarman. So he actually gets a film credit and IMDb, International Movie Database credit for having appeared as, I think they call him Dr. Weil in the movie. That's not the name of the rabbi at that time period. I'm not sure why they didn't use the actual name of the rabbi. Um, which was Jacob Rothschild. Was maybe they didn't want to use the Rothschild name. That maybe that has uh, too much connotation of various things, you know. But the actual name of the rabbi at the time that the temple was bombed was Jacob Rothschild. But one of my colleagues, Alvin Sugarman, got to play the part in this movie. other than that, there's hardly anybody else in this movie, right? So it's very much like a filmed stage play in that sense, that with the exception of the occasional line, like the police officers that stop them when they're driving to the funeral in where are they going? Mississippi, I think.
Alabama.
Alabama for the
Mhm.
funeral.
Yeah.
So, you know, that and you don't even
Thought
see
they
the
were going to the
say
birthday
line.
party for the 90-year-old.
That's what I meant, the birthday party for the 90-year-old
I thought they were going to Alabama. Yeah.
you know, that you don't even actually see that actor say that line, and I'm sure that line doesn't appear in the stage play, but it's about you know, and you know what a sorry sight it is to see Jews and blacks together in Alabama, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, but you know, so that's the cast and the crew. I think it's really well done. I think the music is well done, well placed, a variety of different things that show up. Um, so I kept making notes as going about different music that comes up, you know. Um, Jingle Bells, um, Santa Baby. I'm not sure that all of those are period. You know, whether they're, I'm not sure when Santa Baby by Eartha Kitt was actually released, but they're playing it at her son and daughter-in-law's Christmas party, and where Hoke says something about liking going to the Christmas party, and she says, "Well, you're the only Christian there, so
Right.
you know, it's what a friend we have in Jesus." Of course, there a piece from Dvorak shows up at one point, right? So it's you know, nicely done, I think, all the way through with music. So the time period we're looking at, and I'm not sure, it's not, the movie actually shows us the passage of time, which is why it won a best makeup Oscar, right? And because all of the characters age through the film, and they do a pretty good job of making that seem pretty natural all the way through. So but a couple of events that show up on screen are real events. So the bombing of the temple was 1958 in Atlanta. Interestingly enough, you may know that the 5 months later, a synagogue in Peoria, Illinois, was bombed, and the rabbi there in 1958 was a guy named Joseph Ginsburg, who then came and became the rabbi at our legacy congregation, Lakeside congregation, in 1962, I think. Like 62 to 72, he was the rabbi, right? Is it a little after? I see Babs shaking her head no. Was it a little after that?
Yeah. Yeah, because we got married in 62 and he was not the rabbi who married us. It was Phil Gershon.
Right, who was only there for a short time. And then I think he came right after that. So right after Gershon, so maybe 63 or something like that. And he was there until the early 70s when he retired, actually. So after his wife died, he retired. So
Santa Baby is from 1953, so that was
so it's old enough to have been
old enough. And Hans Zimmer, I mean, I thought, you know, the Driving Miss Davy theme is just, it's so iconic. When you hear it, you immediately think of that movie.
Yeah. I don't know how many Oscars Hans Zimmer has won, but he's been nominated a bunch of times, and I think he's won a few as well. So the other kind of event in time that you see is there was a dinner in 1965 in Atlanta for in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King as a son of Atlanta, Georgia, right, for winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And it was a huge deal that blacks and whites would be having dinner together in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a big deal that the rabbi, Jacob Rothschild, went to the dinner, and members of the Jewish community went to the dinner. And so that's the dinner that that she goes to. And I think one of the most authentic and most sort of period parts of this is that conversation that that Miss Daisy has with Booley about him not going to the dinner, right? That he still has to do business in this town. He said, you know, no one's going to tell me that they're not doing business with me, but right now they do business with me because I'm from Atlanta and because I'm Southern and I'm not a Yankee carpetbagger and stuff like that. But if I go to this, then they may go to the guy down the street, even though he is a Yankee, right? You know, because they'll put me in a different category, basically. And so I saw that growing up, and I've heard that from many people, many Jewish business owners of the time, right? That not that they were opposed to civil rights, but they didn't think it was good business, you know? So I think we human beings in general, not Jews, but human beings in general have a kind of a me first attitude when it comes to life. And you know, that's a part of this. It was the rare person who had the courage to stand up for some of these things, knowing that it might actually hurt business to do it, you know? So, and I'd say even now businesses don't really change willingly. They change when they think it's in their best interest to do so. So, but throughout the time frames, the way the movie tells you what year it is, I think is pretty clever. I mean, sometimes it's by going to the Cadillac dealership and getting the new 1955 model, right? So you get to see in the window, it says, come in and see the 1955 Cadillac, right? So without doing that sort of kind of cliche thing of like, here's the floating newspaper headlines and stuff like that. It takes you sort of year by year through this journey. And that's Miss Daisy's journey since, you know. So I think the title itself is both literal and symbolic, right? Driving Miss Daisy. So Hoke drives her wherever she needs to go, but what's driving her, right? And over time, though she claims right from the beginning that she's not racist, right? There is this progression of character from the 50s through the 60s, you know, that changes as we go along. So, so I think you know, there's a lot of things, and then so much that just evokes who Miss Daisy is and the time period that she lives in, and it's like that, her mahjong game and different sorts of things, right? And you know, she the way she deals with Bully, and you know, he tells her they have to have a serious conversation, and she starts singing after the ball is over, right? So she doesn't have to have a conversation with him. And there's a lot that feels very familiar, I think, and maybe to some of you as well. You know,
Brenda.
Yeah, I love the scene where she's missing a can of, I think it was salmon.
It was.
And she said, well, you're gonna have to, she tells her son he's gonna have to fire him because he stole a can of salmon. Oh my God. And he walks in and with a can of salmon. So she's like, he said, oh, I borrowed this from you and here I'm returning it. So,
right.
you know, so, I mean, I think today, I don't know if we would make such a big deal about a missing can of salmon, but No.
Yeah, probably not. And I mean, you know, we may be lucky enough that we don't actually count how many cans of
Yeah.
tuna, whatever we actually have. It'd be hard pressed to know. I had
Nancy,
9,
did
and
you have
now
a comment?
I certainly do, because Betty fired her cook because she took a can of tuna.
Yeah.
That's Nancy's mother. For those who don't know.
No,
Mother-
my mother-in-law, my
Yeah,
mother-in-law.
It's Hubert and Lee's mother.
Ay,
Yeah, you know,
So it
Yeah.
does happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
it absolutely does. No question about it. And I'm sure Betty was not the only one, right? And
Right.
so but yeah, I mean the movie gets great both comic and dramatic value out of you know, right, how minor that infraction is, even if he'd actually done it, right? But what he actually you know, did it because he was hungry and brought a can to make it up for it. Right? So at which point she realizes that she is dealing with a person of integrity and a human, and you know, you watch that change in her over time. She's never perfect. None of us ever is, right? But she grows over the course of the movie. I will say this is one of many movies where you know, there's kind of the now stereotypical character of the magical Negro, as it's often referred to, right? And that's the character that Hoke plays in this movie, and Morgan Freeman has played quite a few of them over the years, where their main function is to help white people learn something.
Mhm.
So,
Sue.
yeah.
So there were a couple of things, a couple of scenes that I found interesting, and one especially, I guess both of them a little bit troubling. When somebody, oh, I guess it's the policeman who talks to Hoke and says, boy,
Yeah,
and Hoke just answers him,
right.
allows himself to be called boy.
Yeah.
But I guess if he didn't, he would have been in big trouble.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that bothered me a lot, and I'm not sure it's an accurate description of Jewish families, even in the South. What's that? Anyway, and that was the Christmas party.
Uh-huh.
Oh, my Lord. I mean, I know that there have been Jewish families that on an occasion would have a Christmas tree. I mean, my family never did, but I did know people who did do that. And some people who called it a Hanukkah bush and decorated it with blue and white ornaments, which is kind of funny. But to the extent that they had that Christmas party with all the songs and all the decorations, and I just don't think that could possibly be an accurate perception of what Jews.
I think
Oh,
it's
yes,
pretty
it was.
Yes,
accurate.
it is.
Yeah, Sue, I'm
Certainly
afraid
was.
you're in the minority on that one.
Particularly German Jews.
Yeah,
Really?
They want
Yeah.
to fit in. They want to show
Yeah.
that
I
they can
know,
fit
I
in.
know that, see, I was raised on the north side of Chicago, but I know people on the south side were not as, I know that
I was a
Most
South
people are-
Sider. I was raised with all of it.
with the with
Yeah.
Christmas,
Oh,
I-
yes.
Yeah.
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 And we never, on the north side, that was very rare. That never happened.
Yeah, Nancy, did you
It
have
was South
Christmas
Side
parties
Jews
as
that
well
did
as
it.
having a tree?
Did I
Pardon?
what? Go to parties?
Did the family have Christmas parties as well as having?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, we entertained and we had Christmas trees.
right.
Well, I
So,
think it
there
might
is
have.
an interesting, if I can just give a historical thing here, that the first wave of the first good sized wave of Jewish immigration is the German Jews who came in the 1850s, and the Christmas tree in Germany was not called a Christmas tree. It was the Tannenbaum. And it was largely seen by many people as, right, because it's literally true that the Christmas tree is not a Christmas symbol, right? I mean, it's not a part of the Jesus story in any way and things like that. It's one of those things that found its way into Christianity through other, pagan religions that are older than Christianity. So something like the Druids, who were tree worshipers, and
Right.
that's where it comes from. And it gets into German culture as this tree, and it's only later that the gloss of the idea that it's a Christmas tree, and where people start saying, "Oh, it's the wood of the cross," and it's different things like that. That comes much later, right, than the ritual of the tree itself.
Mm.
The Yule log would be another example of something like that that came out of the pagan sacrificial tradition. But so in Germany, even now, it's not called a Christmas tree; it's called a Tannenbaum. And so the German Jews came and they loved their German culture so much. Remember that they're very different than the Russian Jews who came a couple of generations later, who were so happy to get out of Russia. They wanted to leave everything Russian behind, And the German Jews were very much wanting to hold on to the German tradition, so much so that the first Reform prayer books in America are in Hebrew and German, right? It's not until the turn of the 20th century that the Reform movement's prayer book is translated from German into English, right? Around 1895, I think the first English translation of and so some of the early Reform rabbis in North America spoke German much better than they spoke English, and they led services in Hebrew and German for a couple of generations here in the United States. So so it wasn't until a little later on that this Christmas tree tradition sort of caught up with Judaism in America, and maybe some generations of German Jews down through the generations, maybe the Christmas tree has faded a bit among those families. But
Rabbi, what's interesting, my family came from Russia.
yeah,
And my mother when my brothers and I used to ask to have a Christmas tree, my mother's explanation was, it's an evergreen tree. And that's the symbol of the ever-living Christ. We will not have that in our home.
right.
That-
Yeah, I mean,
that
those are
was
the
her
kinds of
explanation.
glosses that get put on the tree after the fact, right? I mean, we have that stuff too. We have an egg on the Seder plate. Nobody knows why, right?
Yeah.
It's from some tradition before Judaism.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm of German descent, and I had family that came over very early on, like you described, and they
Right.
were extremely assimilated as Jews. In fact, when I was born, they sent as a gift, they sent a christening dress for me, which I
Wow.
thought was a little strange, okay?
Okay.
However, my parents and my immediate family, we definitely did not celebrate Christmas. We didn't have any tree. We didn't, it was we were strictly observant Jews, and at the time that my daughter became engaged, her future mother-in-law brought as a gift to us a poinsettia plant. Now, and I thought, what the heck is this? I just brought it out into the kitchen and I said, thank you very much. So I
Yeah,
just thought it just
that's
seemed
funny.
inappropriate. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
We had an aunt who sent a poinsettia plant as a
Yeah.
gift every year. That was her gift, not knowing what it meant or symbolized.
And I guess I would make the argument with all these things that they really don't mean anything. They don't
Right.
really symbolize anything.
Yeah.
But
It's just around.
The Christmas flower.
right. So,
Yeah.
but they have a certain meaning has been bestowed on them because they come around that time of year, right? So, someone's probably got a reason why the poinsettia is a Christmas thing, but
Yeah.
but that's not what it was originally, certainly.
Right.
Well, I just would like to say, Al and I saw that movie when it first came out. We thought, gee, it was really a wonderful movie. And he
Mhm.
and I watched it together Saturday night. And it made a far greater impact on us this time watching it
Yeah.
than it did 30 years ago. And I guess maybe because we're of the age
Mhm.
of Miss Daisy.
Right.
I also have a funny story. My mother was living at the Breakers, and the gentleman who drove the van was an African-American gentleman, was called for jury duty. And the judge asked, is there anybody here who feels that they should not be called to serve on a jury? And this gentleman raised his hand and he said, what's your reason? He said, well, I have to drive my Miss Daisies. The judge said to him, well, what do you mean? He said, I'm the driver at the Breakers and I have to take my ladies where they're going. He
Yeah.
said, you're dismissed.
Uh-huh.
So that was, I always chuckled when I thought about that.
Yeah.
That was my, his Miss Daisies.
Actually, I'm kind of a Miss Daisy right now because I'm not allowed to drive anymore. So I found the easiest way to get around is to get a driver, and it so happens my driver's Hispanic, and but I sit in the front with him. I don't, and he
Yeah.
has some. He personally is Catholic, but he's very pro-Israel, and he keeps telling me that he's got cousins who are Jewish and etc. So it's sort of interesting.
Yeah. So I think the movie's really very good. And there's I like right from the start when she hits it shows us that she hits the gas instead of the brake. Right. So the accident that starts everything in motion is absolutely her fault. She shouldn't be driving anymore. But then when the tow truck comes and they start pulling things out, the camera shows us everybody in the neighborhood is watching, right? And so this sort of evokes this kind of time, which maybe we're not quite as attentive to our neighbors as people were back then, for good and bad, But she feels very much that she's on display and doesn't like it, right? She just wants things to go on the way they are, and that sounds pretty familiar, right? So in terms of the time and place in the South, I mean, my mother grew up in the South in this time period, and it wasn't until a little later in her life that she became a crusader for civil rights, and she always credited my father, who grew up in New York, for kind of opening her eyes to what she hadn't really noticed growing up in the South, which was that if she was walking down the street, black men would step out of the way and down into the gutter while she walked past, right? And she didn't really think twice about it because that was, the life that she lived in that time period in the South. So the idea that I think Sue's the one who brought it up, that when the police say something to him and call him boy, it's another one of the times he just says yes and right. And as I said, I think there's a great actor's lesson in watching this film and all the different ways he says that one word. That can, so he says it to those policemen with a kind of a gravitas and a dignity, right? That, um, that shows what he's thinking inside, but there's nothing else he can say in that situation without getting into serious trouble, right? So, I think really clever in that regard.
The other poignant, when he has to go to the bathroom
Oh,
and he gets that conversation, I thought that was very, realistic and just poignant, and something that I remembered 30 years later, having seen it 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, both all elements of that scene are pretty powerful, right? But the idea that when they stop for gas, she can go use a restroom and he can't.
Yeah.
We're already starting to see Jews have become white people,
Mhm.
right? So that's one side of that. But the other side of it is that, he says to her, I'm an adult. And I probably have the exact language written down somewhere, but he's an adult and he knows what he has to do. And of course, once he gets out of the car, she becomes terrified,
Yeah.
starts calling him by name. So the dependence that she's developed on him, so that by the end of the movie, she says to him, "You're my best friend,"
Mhm.
is really something quite powerful.
And how sad at the end when she sends her son away,
Yeah,
and she says, he's come to visit me. And
right.
okay, now go on.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was just very poignant.
Yeah.
Rabbi, when I mentioned to you that, or I don't know if you were on yet, when I said that when Dick and I were living in England on an Air Force base, and one of our dearest friends was a couple from Mobile, Alabama, and his name was Booley.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
his nickname, but
Right.
his wife and I were expecting babies at the same time and were taken care of on the base by the same obstetrician who happened to be Black.
Mm.
And she made me promise when her parents came over for the birth of the baby that I never ever said anything about her being taken care of by a Black man, because if her father knew that a Black man had touched her in such a personal way, he'd have a fit.
Right.
And this was in 1961.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 5 years before the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Act and things that really made a big difference. It's 3 years before Martin Luther King wins the Nobel Peace Prize for his civil rights work, right? So 1961 was a long time ago. Right? I mean, it's longer than it is mathematically, I guess, right? In a way. So, there's so many scenes that I really enjoy in this movie. I mean, I like when Hook comes in to get a raise, for example, and we don't actually know, whether what he's saying is 100% true, that someone else in the family has offered him a job driving and he can name his salary, but and Booley says, how does 65 sound? He says, sounds pretty good. 75 sounds better. Okay. Yeah. And how good it feels to have folks fighting over you, right? So,
I have a question.
yes.
Is the daughter-in-law Jewish? Daisy keeps making negative comments about that daughter-in-law.
Yeah, well, she is Jewish,
Okay.
but the negative comments mostly come from her being a poser, I think, right? That she wants to be more Christian than the Christians.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. But right. I mean, that's why they go to the Christmas party. And as I said earlier, Hoke says he likes it. And he says, well, you're the only Christian there. I guess you should, So it's all, a Christmas party filled with assimilated Jews. Right. And so for Daisy, it's a step too far. Right.
Mhm.
She
Right.
wants to fit in. She wants to be an American. She is shocked when the temple is bombed. How could that happen? That civil rights stuff has nothing to do with her, right? But her daughter-in-law's step into Episcopalian culture, as she calls it, I think, early on, that she wants to socialize with Episcopalians, is a step too far.
Mhm.
And she signs up to be active in the Republican Party. And
Right.
Daisy made a comment about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Is the shot of the temple the actual
yes,
temple?
that is the actual temple in both the interior and the exterior. You see both briefly in the film.
Is-
So I don't
Is it
know.
a Reform temple?
It is a Reformed temple. I believe it's always been a Reformed temple. And as I said, one of the hallmarks of the Reformed temple is that it's called a temple, right?
Yeah.
Rather
Yep.
than a synagogue. And this place is, as you can see, their website is the temple, right? A lot of places, you know, and a lot of people in Jewish tradition would find that to be, you know, the only place that you can refer to the temple with a definite article is Jerusalem, right? On the Temple Mount where the ancient temples used to stand. So it's actually a kind of a symbol of defiance in a way to call this place the temple. So,
Well,
and you,
that bema cannot be easy to get up to. That's all I'm saying. Where's their ramp?
Sanctuary.
They probably use this chapel.
Yeah. So I've been in that sanctuary for services, but I've never gone up on the bema. So I can't say too much about it, but you're right, it's not accessible. I don't think it is now. I don't, you know, it hasn't been altered. So
Can I ask a question that has nothing to do with what we're talking about
oh,
before we get off this?
yeah.
Trump has a new ad out
Mhm.
of 4 Jewish women having
I
lunch.
saw that yesterday. Yeah.
Are they Jewish women?
I don't know who's playing those parts. You know, they're supposed to be Jewish women, clearly.
Friends of Sheldon Adelstein's widow. That's who.
Maybe, but
I'm not kidding.
yeah, I found it
Disturbing.
rather offensive, actually.
Tell us about the ad. I haven't seen it.
It's basically 4 women sitting around like in a coffee shop or somewhere, right? And
Right,
talking about why they're going to vote for Trump because whatever else he's going to do, at least he's going to keep us safe.
Oh,
Oh, God.
oh.
Ugh.
and
After he keeps himself safe.
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
also like Woody Allen. They're like,
Yeah.
yes,
that's the part to me, aside from the obvious, of course, he's not going to keep us safe. That's my opinion. But
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, is the word jingoistic? I don't know, but it was, that's not how we are. So
Right.
that's what I found really offensive.
Stereotypical, I think, might be the
there.
word.
Israel's under attack, anti-Semitism like I never thought I would see.
Did you read about Samantha's boy Max?
No,
He got spit on just walking at Penn.
I mean, that's scary.
What about Kamala? Oh, busy defending the squad.
Ay vey. You know, Trump I never cared for, but at least he'll keep us safe.
I never voted Republican in my life, but I am voting Trump.
Amen. RJC Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this message.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
You see?
Well, that's enough.
Oh, yeah.
Another one of his lies, that's all.
right. You know, I mean, as I mentioned on Yom Kippur, I mean, he's the presidential candidate who says if he loses, it's our fault.
Yeah.
that's right. And
Is that sermon available anywhere, online or anything?
I don't think we published it online, but I can certainly send anybody a copy who wants it. So if you want a copy, I can send it to you, Elaine.
I would love to read it again. Yeah.
It also, I can also, if anyone wanted to watch it again, I can send you the video link to just watch the sermon
That'd be great.
again. But you know, so you have your pick. You can have it in written form or video form.
I'd love to see it again. It was truly outstanding.
Well, thank you. So, I heard a couple of people walked out.
oh, really?
That's what I heard. I didn't see them, but you know.
Well, that's always good.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, if they'd stayed, I think I was pretty even-handed, you know, that I have a concern about the far left too, but, you know, so,
Maybe
you
they
know,
just
but-
had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. And
The question is, why would any Jew vote for him? I just can't believe it.
yeah.
Plenty of them are, unfortunately.
They are, yep.
There have always been, first of all, we've always had a significant number of registered Republicans in our congregation, and I would say the great majority of them are not voting for Donald Trump in our community at this point. But there has been a sizable part of the Orthodox community that has been voting Republican for quite a while. Actually, and most of it is related to two issues in particular. One is the Second Amendment and the right to bear guns. They've bought into a fictitious story that Hitler took the guns away from us, and then he could perpetuate the Shoah. That's actually been totally debunked, but people are still hanging on to it. And the other thing is actually about schools, school vouchers, and government subsidy of religious schools, right? Because a lot of Orthodox Jews, of course, do send their children to religious schools, many of which don't actually teach what people need to know. There's a big expose in the New York Times about how little the religious schools in the Jewish community have actually taught kids in terms of how to read and write and do arithmetic and things like that. But at any rate, they'd love to get that government subsidy for those schools. And so those folks have been voting Republican for a long time before Trump. And then there's this debate about Trump and Israel. And, so we had an Israeli journalist here now, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago, Tal Schneider. And when she was speaking, she spoke as a journalist, and she was very persistent about being factual and things like that. But in my private conversations with her, she thought that Trump would be a disaster for Israel, right? I think she and I have some differences of opinion of why he would be a disaster. I mean, I actually think he would be a disaster because he's incompetent, and she thinks he would be a disaster because he is competent. But but we agreed on the bottom line that not a good choice for the state of Israel.
But coming back, I don't think that Trump he uses the name Republican, but he's not the Republican that I know.
Right.
Well, that's what everyone is saying.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody is saying
No,
it.
not everybody, but all the many Republicans who are not voting for him.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, anyhow, let's. I think we need to close up shop, and I know
We
it's
do.
hard.
I'm sure I don't. Right. I'm sure I don't need to tell everyone, you've either voted or you're going to vote, and
I vote.
that's what we want, and you're pledged to vote. And
So we are not meeting next Tuesday because it's election day.
right.
I will be up in Wisconsin that day.
And we're not meeting the next Tuesday
I can
for some reason.
show you my badge.
Oh,
This is what
good.
What does it say, Paul?
try and get it in focus.
Peacekeeper.
Right there.
Chaplain.
Very excellent.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
that's what I will be doing in Racine, Wisconsin next week.
Oh,
So
Good for you.
yeah.
And we meet again on the 19th.
Right. Right. And by then, perhaps the votes will be counted, and we'll.
I hope so.
We certainly hope so.
Yeah.
All right, it's good seeing everyone.
Well, this
Bye-bye.
was a good choice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great class.
Focus.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.
Right. Then the movie next time is called Focus. Make sure you get the right one. It's got the actor William Macy in it. From what year is it from? 2001. Because there are actually several movies called Focus, and there's one called Autofocus. Those are not the ones.
Okay.
So make sure you get the right one.
Amazing.
What was
So-
that date?
2001.
November 19th.
19th.
Okay.
It'll be in your Macomb at home. And this is always the link.
I didn't realize you
Alright.
have to scroll all the way down.
Yeah, and we put
I-
both, as I've done every time, these movies are sort of in pairs. So we'll come back to Driving Miss Daisy as we talk about Focus a little bit too. I'd say that they both deal with the image of Jews in America and with anti-Semitism to a degree, right? So we'll come back to that when we look at Focus.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
Great.
right, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
You.